The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to number 2 of the Business Builder webinars. I'm Mark Lawson, Managing Director of Business Vision, a firm of accountants in Plymouth, and we specialise in helping businesses grow, make more profits, and generally have an easier life. We do lots and lots of Business Builder seminars, which are live presentations. We've been doing those for about 15 years. And we've now started to do webinars as well, and this is number 2. And today we're going to be looking at the power of Xero bookkeeping software, which is an up-and-coming software that we heartily endorse and is really shaking the whole bookkeeping system by the neck and producing something really modern. So we're going to go through that and give you an idea, not necessarily a full training program, but an idea of how it works, why Xero is something we recommend, how it's taking over, and generally why the cloud for bookkeeping is a better thing for you. So let me just show you what we're going to be going through briefly today. The webinar should last roughly about 45 minutes, but you are able to ask questions on your little right-hand slot. There should be a space there to type in questions. And if I get time at the end of today's sessions, I'll try and go through those and get as many answered as possible. But I'm going to look at the cloud generally, just to give you a bit of background. Some of you will already be dealing with the cloud on a regular basis, but some of you may not. So we'll go through and just explain what that's all about. Then we're going to go through the Xero company, what they're doing, why they're reputable, where they've come from, where they're heading. And then I'm going to go online and just show you the software and some of the key points that I think will help you save time and money doing your bookkeeping system. Okay, so let's look at the cloud. Basically, the cloud is just an IT way of saying apps and computer software online. So we're already dealing with that probably. In many cases, if you've got a LinkedIn account, that is obviously something that's in the cloud. If you've got a Facebook account, that will be in the cloud. Things like Microsoft 365, instead of having Microsoft Office installed on your computer or PC, that's accessible through the cloud as well. So it's something that is already there. We are dealing with it, but increasingly it's moving software away from your PC, from your hard drive, onto somebody else's hard drive that's available through the internet. So all you need to have access to Xero is internet access and some sort of computer, PC, iPad or iPhone. So what are the benefits of the cloud generally? Well, firstly is that you don't actually have to save your data anywhere. You don't have to worry about information not being saved, particularly if you've already got bookkeeping software. And I'll refer quite frequently to Sage because that is at the moment the biggest market leader in the UK. So if you have Sage software and all your bookkeeping's on it, you will have to save that not only to your PC, but to make arrangements to save it maybe off site, so that if anything happens to, your computer or your premises, then you still have data held somewhere else. Now, in my experience, many businesses don't have any other form of saving other than to the PC, which is obviously quite dangerous. But if you're on the cloud, you don't need to save anything. You don't need to access it on a PC. It's just saved for you on somebody else's PC. You don't have to do anything. Because of that, obviously, you don't need storage. So there's no need to have actually storage space. You don't need a bigger computer, hard drive. It's all saved on somebody else's system, and their system is absolutely mammoth. And increasingly, that's the way things will go, in that in probably 10 or 20 years, the situation where you have a PC with a big hard drive is going to be gone, and you'll just access everything on somebody else's hard drive. The other big benefit, which we'll explain, is that it is accessible to everybody. So many people can access the cloud at the same time. And in terms of Xero, obviously the benefit of that is you can have your accountant working on some things within Xero at the same time as you can have members of staff accessing invoices on there. You can have other people producing reports. There's no limit to accessibility, it's not one person, one PC. So anybody you invite can have access to stuff on the cloud. It is ultra secure, and one of the key questions we get asked with Xero bookkeeping is how safe and secure is it? Well, the reality is, compared to every single PC that I've seen Sage Delta held on, it is far more secure. It's saved in a bunker or two bunkers in the East Coast of the United States, in the same place as most large corporations save their data, and it's saved in two locations so that if anything does happen to one bunker, which would typically have to be something like a nuclear strike, then it would still be in the other bunker. So it's very, very secure, very, very safe compared to the ability of people at the moment to access your Sage or other bookkeeping data. Then there are no worries at all. Surprisingly, because of the extra benefits of Xero, there are quite good cost benefits as well. The actual software is generally cheaper than most software out there. Typically, Xero will come in at about £20 a month. You can get a slightly bigger version that does different forms of currency. If you do trading internationally, then that costs slightly higher. And there is a cash book version where you don't put on invoices, you just typically have money in, money out, and that comes in a bit cheaper. But typically for most businesses, it's going to be about £20 a month, and that does include customer support, which typically you don't get with people like Sage and so on. So for £240 a year, then you can have access to that ongoing. There's no extra charges for updates. Updates just happen as and when you want. So cloud generally, cost benefits, but particularly with Xero, there are some substantial cost benefits there as well. Just some information about the cloud, just so you can see why this is going to be the big thing if it isn't already. These are several quotes. So spending on the cloud is set to increase by threefold, 300% increase in the current year 2014. According to IDC, 86% of businesses are already using cloud apps, and 60% of SMEs, that's small businesses, are going to increase their cloud budget in the short term. So there's lots and lots of things going on with the cloud, and it is set to be the biggest change in computers, probably since computers were formed and email started to exist. So let's just have a look at Xero generally, the company. And let's just see who they are, what they're doing. They're an Australian company, so they've been around quite a bit before they even sort of hit the UK shores. They are the world's leading online accounting software company. So that includes Sage. Sage are a fairly big company, but they're only really present in the UK. They're not known in Australia or America, and they're not particularly as big on the online side at all, even though they're starting to move into that area. There are 250,000 customers in 100 countries, and that is growing very, very rapidly. They've just had a huge venture capital investment so that they can attack the United States, and they are already growing very, very quickly in the UK, partly because people like me are raving about them. They're the fastest growing tech company in Australia, and they are a global organisation with offices in 4 countries, of which the UK is one. So let's look at the software and just give you an overview of why we think it's something that if you are in business and you've got bookkeeping requirements, why you might want to be looking at Xero as opposed to Sage or any other sort of manual or computerized bookkeeping system. So generally, the main benefit of Xero is that it links in with many people simultaneously, and the linkage is going to grow and become better as time goes on. So there's obviously a link to the accountant. We strongly recommend that if you do get Xero, you get your accountant to get it and then invite your company. That way the accountant can see every single company they've got on Xero, and they have some extra benefits, such as we can keep an eye out to see whether people are accessing it regularly, whether they haven't done all their bank transactions. So it makes sense to go through the accountant. The other benefit of having the accountant involved is that they are increasingly going to be getting discount from Xero for bulk purchase. So whereas you might pay £20 a month, eventually people like myself and other accountants will have so many clients on Xero that they'll be able to pass on the costs at a reduced level. Obviously, the small business has access to Xero and all its employees, or at least all of those that are invited by the business owner. Employees can have access, but that's not automatic. They have to be invited. And there are different levels of things they can do, which I'll show you a bit later. Banks are integrated. One of the big benefits, which I'll explain later, is that there is access to most banks' transactions, and that means you can get your transactions straight into Xero without typing them in, and that's one of the big benefits. And various other people are now having access online, such as suppliers, customers, etc. To give you a flavour of how that might work, if you've got, let's say, a customer set up in Xero, and you produce an invoice, you can email them that invoice, but more importantly, if that customer is also a Xero user and they've agreed, then that invoice can go straight into their purchase ledger without them having to do anything. So you can email them your invoice and that appears as an invoice to be paid within their bookkeeping system with no further work being done their end. And that sort of integration and forward thinking is something that is becoming better and better in Xero all the time. So there's lots of different people can access it, primarily because it is in the cloud. It's a single ledger, so all those people can access it at the same time and make changes. One of the biggest problems with places like Sage is that if you want your accountant to start changing stuff, you effectively have to stop processing, give the accountant a backup, let them do what they need to do, then reload the backup and carry on. Don't need to do that with Xero. If you've got access, you can access it, change things, so you can have different people changing different things at the same time, and it will all end up within your database. So you can access it from anywhere. I say, as long as you've been invited, anyone can access it, and that includes access from things like iPads and iPhones. And what we're now finding is employees who might be out and about, who might regularly submit expense claims, can have an app which is free from Xero where they can scan in their receipts and invoices into the app using their iPhone or iPad, and that appears as an expense claim in Xero for the relevant person in the business to authorize and then eventually pay. So complete access from outside. And that includes, very importantly, the accountant. So the accountant can update it and review it in real time. So, for example, we're quite keen on giving clients the adjustments to bookkeeping for the year-end figures. And we normally send clients a list of that so they can put it on their Sage. Or with Xero, we don't need to do that. We can go in ourselves, put the adjustments in. You don't know it's happened. It just happens automatically. There's no backups, as I've mentioned earlier. You don't need to back up the data. You don't need to save the data as you're going along. It just is saved. So no worries on that at all. There's no update fees, as I mentioned earlier. So Xero don't charge if they do major updates. They tell you when the updates are coming. They tell you what they're going to include, but they don't change the monthly direct debit. Because of that, there might be a period where for 20 minutes or so it might be down for updating, but that's usually done in the early hours of a Sunday morning. And to be honest, if you're on Xero in the early hours of a Sunday morning, then you need to start doing something different. There's no customer service charge. One of the big benefits over Sage, for example, where Sage charge quite large figures for actually helping you do things with customer service, Xero don't have that. So the way Xero works is that they just charge you the £20 and there is inclusive within that customer service. The reason they can do it free is that initially that customer inquiry is done by email, and you can tell them with the customer inquiry how urgent it is and they will come back as quickly as you ask them to. If that query then gets to become something bigger, they will then suggest maybe a phone call and sort it out over the phone. But initially it's all done by email. It's very efficient, and the Xero help is also excellent. So you don't need to be ringing anybody on a regular basis, but it is free. And as I said before, the data that they hold on your behalf is ultra secure. There are unlimited users, so as many people as you want in your organization can have access, and they can have different levels of access. So you can have basically at the top end, the managing director can do everything. They can invite users, they can change anything they like, And at the bottom end, you can have somebody who's only able to enter an expense claim. You can't see anything else within the system. You can't do anything else within the system. And there's lots of different levels in between. One of the big benefits, which I'll go through and show you later in practice, is that the bank transactions come directly from the relevant bank. So if you bank, let's say with NatWest, the information that's held on your bank statements is securely transferred into Xero without the need to enter any transactions whatsoever. Now, if you can imagine how long it takes to enter a bank statement's worth of transactions into, for example, Sage, that's a huge time saving. And it's taken a long time coming, but it hasn't made any sense for the last 20 years for banks to hold all your bank data on a computer and for you then to have to print that onto manual paper in order to re-enter it into a different computer via Sage. Now you don't have to do that. It just appears. With some banks, it appears automatically. You don't need to do a thing. With other banks, they do ask that you actually log in and then press a button and the information appears. But at the most, it's going to take about 20 seconds and all the latest bank transactions since the last ones will appear in your bookkeeping system. Another big time-saving thing, although it won't be available for everybody, is that you can automatically enter your purchase invoices. So the invoices you have to pay can be automatically entered by scanning. Now, there is quite a complex and expensive piece of software for this, but it's something we have where we can take your purchase invoices, run it through a high-speed scanner, and then all of that information is optically recognized and gets entered into your Xero automatically together with a copy of the actual invoice itself. You know, again, if you can imagine how long it would take a clerk to enter 100 purchase invoices, that's a huge amount of time saving, and it's also more accurate because a computer or photocopier will recognize symbols and numbers more accurately than a human who's typing them in, and after number 50 or 100, that can obviously become prone to errors. Another big benefit is that Xero is open year, by which I mean you don't need to close down each year in order to start entering stuff in the next year. You just carry on all the time. It just continues and continues month by month, year by year. If you wanted to enter a transaction for last month, you can do. If you want to enter a transaction for last year, you can do. That is subject to something called a lockdown, where even though it's open year, if you've closed down last year and you wouldn't want anybody going back and putting anything into that year, you can actually close down the date and say that nobody must put something in dated before 1st of January, for example, apart from possibly the accountant. So there is some protection, but it basically means that you don't need to close down the year end, send the backup to the accountant before you can start putting stuff into the next year. It's all open database and you just enter it with any date you like. You've got drill down access to data, which probably will be easier to explain when I show you the actual software. But what that means is you don't have to go out of each screen in order to access different bits of information. Just drill down and drill down until you get to where you need to get to. You don't need to come out of different parts of the menu and go into other parts. And I say I'll show you that when I go through the actual software. And another big benefit, I think, over software like Sage is that it is fully editable. So if you make a mistake, you can just go into that transaction and change it. You can change the amount, you can change the customer, supplier, you can change the VAT code, you can change anything you like within that transaction. Now, with people like Sage, that becomes a hugely time-consuming process because they've made a decision many years ago not to allow you to actually change things once it had been put in, mainly for security purposes. But their process to change something is to create, for example, a credit note, then to put in a new invoice and then to match it all up again, which takes a huge amount of time. And as errors will happen, being fully editable does save a lot of time as well, and it is simple. The other big benefit I think we'll find with Xero as time goes by is rather than do what Sage do, which is to buy out other businesses and pretend that they're actually part of Sage, is primarily Xero are getting involved with other online cloud-based systems and producing joint ventures. They call it add-ons, where they have hundreds of different businesses they liaise with, and their computer system talks to other people's computer systems, and eventually when they're happy with that other business working in a similar and accurate way, they will advertise them as an add-on. And there are some very good ones out there. So there will be things, for example, like linkage to online computer shops. So if you have a website that does sales, those sales can actually go straight into Xero if that sales company is an add-on from Xero. There's also CRM systems. There are specific systems for beauty shops, hairdressers, all sorts of things, stock control systems, etc., etc. So if you are interested in Xero, I would recommend you type in Xero add-ons and see what else is also available. And the good news about the add-ons is that they work in a very similar way to Xero, in that they're online and they are very forward-thinking and modern. So I'll just now go into the actual Xero software. So I'll just tweak around with my software a little bit. And get you the online system. So this is my internet access showing a demo company of Xero, and you can access this demo company. If you go on to Xero.com, you can get a free 30-day trial, and part of that trial will give you access to a demo company which has data already built in, so you can play around with your heart's content without actually damaging anything. Excuse me. So I'll just guide you through it, but immediately you can see that it's a very clean, modern finish to it. It looks like a modern piece of software, and it looks like it's going to do the job. At the top, you can see there that there's only a few tabs, so there's very little there to actually have to find your way around. I'll guide you through those in a moment, but the dashboard, which is the view we're on at the moment, is really where you can do most of the stuff you need to do within Xero. So you can actually do all your bank reconciliations within that bit. You can do all your sales invoices and work out who owes you, send out statements, etc. from within that bit. And the same with the purchases, money going out there, and your expense claims is all controlled at this bit down here. So most of what you need to do can be done from within that page. You don't need to go and find your way around very complicated software. So that's the dashboard, and I'll come back to that a bit later. But let me just start going through a few other areas within the software. So if we look at settings, generally most of the settings will be done once, and that's at the very beginning. And if it's done through us, we can set all that up from you. You can, if you're already on Sage or other bookkeeping systems, you can bring in the opening balances from that system. You can bring in all the contact details, their names and addresses. So generally you can export all your existing data into Xero with minimum fuss. If you do want, for example, a year's worth of transactions brought across from Sage or other bookkeeping systems, that isn't something that Xero does automatically, but it has an add-on with a company that will do it for a small fee of about £100 to £200. So if you want the data transferred across rather than keep it in the old Sage, then you can certainly do that. So settings I won't go through in great detail. That's something that contains all your general setup. I'll mention a couple of bits within settings. One is that you are allowed unlimited invoice templates. So you can have different templates for different clients, different templates for different types of sales, and they are very easy to design. I've already done a number of those for clients, and I must admit that I spent months and months trying to work out how to do templates in Sage and eventually gave up. And I've only ever come across one client who ever successfully managed to do that within Xero. It's dead easy. You can export a template into Word. As long as you know your way around Microsoft Word, you can change everything and then import it back in. Very simple. And you can have as many of those as you like. Chart of accounts, this is basically where your initial list of accounts, your nominal ledger, if you like, is held. I won't go into this in great detail because this is more where accountants tend to look, but just so you can see the interactivity of it. So we can see here that code 200 is the sales, and you can have as many different sales codes as you like, as with Sage. But if I click onto that, you can see there that it tells you what type of code it is. Over here, it will tell you where that will appear in your account, so you can see that it's in the right place. And unlike Sage, you cannot miss anything. So there is a big fault with Sage in my view, which is that the way it's set up, you can set up several codes and they don't appear in your accounts. So your profit and loss and your balance sheet don't actually balance because you've set up new codes and the system doesn't know that they're there. With Xero, that can't happen. So we take sales just so you can see how you don't need to go into different places. That tells you what sales is. There's a little bit of narrative that tells somebody who's entering stuff what you would like them to typically enter there, just in case there's any confusion. So, for example, if I'm entering motor insurance, do I enter it in motoring or insurance? There's a little bit of space to tell people what you want them to do. But over here is the year-to-date figure. Now, rather than go to the reports, I can just click on that figure to get details of everything that's gone through for sales to date. So I don't have to go anywhere else. That was already available to me. And if I want, I can now drill down even further into that transaction. And that shows me the actual sales invoice, how it was set up and when it was paid. And I can do all of that from within the same place. So that's the chart of accounts. As I say, the chart of accounts you don't tend to refer to once it's set up, but it just gives you a flavour of how you can access anything from effectively the same place. Contacts, this is where all your contacts are held, and as I said, if you're on Sage or similar bookkeeping systems, you can bring those contacts in from your old system with all the names and addresses. So if we look at customers, again, not dissimilar to Sage or any other bookkeeping system, the names of all the customers are there with all their details and addresses. So I can click on there to get access to their address details, etc. So that says who the contact details are. But more importantly, even from within this piece of information, I can now go off and see that they owe £914.55 from within the same screen. And if I click on that, I can actually go straight into another report that's going to tell me how that figure's been worked out and what they owe. In this case, it's one invoice. And again, I can click on there and even drill down into the invoice. So everything is available from everywhere, so you don't need to spend a lot of time finding your way around. Similar things apply to suppliers, so you can go into suppliers, employees as contacts. The advisor tab is typically where the accountant goes, so you wouldn't spend much time there, so that's where manual journals are entered, which for obvious reasons, Xero doesn't recommend is done by a business owner because it does require a little bit of bookkeeping and accounting skill. Management reports. So again, what Xero and ourselves strongly recommend is that with a system like this, you have accurate final management accounts produced on a monthly basis. And this is where the accountant would go in and publish those figures for you so that you can say, great, there's my figures for the end of May. It's also where you can do your VAT return. So the VAT return works in a very similar way to Sage. It enters all your details. It will produce a facsimile copy of your VAT return with all the numbers. And you can even send it from within Xero, or you can print it out and type it into the online system if you wanted to. Like Sage, it also has the ability to bring in any late transaction from previous quarters that haven't been reported in a VAT return. There's the ability to do your normal accounts. There's an ability, if you wanted to export all the figures into another piece of software or another file, just in case you were worried about backup. And there's a history of everything that's happened and who's done it. So even though people can change things and edit them very easily, there is a history of what they've done. So you can search it in here and find out who Anne Jones, has changed within your system and when. Reports, again, very comprehensive compared to Sage, where there's not a lot of flexibility. So we look at, for example, profit and loss account. You can see there that you've got typical profit and loss account, but you've actually got individual months, whereas with Sage, the default is current month and year to date, and that's all you can report on. But you've got ultimate flexibility. So if I wanted to look at, let's say, the figures up to May 14 by month, and I want the previous 6 months to be included in the report, I can do that. So now I've got those, and again, if I wanted to, I could click on the figures and drill down into those. So I don't need to come out of the report in order to look at what's in there. So if I was worried about why that figure is in advertising and marketing, I can just click on it and it will actually tell me what's in there. So very easy to find your way, and loads of different varieties of profit and loss and other reports that you can do. So as you'd expect, you've got the ability to report on who owes you money, who you owe, your balance sheet. You can also do profit and losses by different departments. So one of the benefits of Xero is that you have the ability to have not one but two different ways of reporting. So as well as having, for example, sales codes where you might have sales of widgets B, sales of white widgets, which is typically what you would do in Sage and Xero. So you might use one code for one type of sales and then the profit and loss adds them all together. This allows you to also report by different factors other than sales types. So for example, in the demo version, they are also set up to report by area. So with the demo, they have a tracking facility where they look at east, north, south and west, which basically means we can then start producing profit and loss accounts by those departments. So you'd have your sales types on the left if there were more than one, but you've also then got a split between the areas. And you can do that twice. So for example, we could have east, north, south, west, but we could also then have another split that shows us, for example, sales by salesman. So that starts to give you a huge amount of analysis to help you work out where the business is, what it's doing, and what individual people or areas or branches are doing within the organisation. So I say a lot more flexibility on reporting, and obviously the ability to drill down into all those figures from within the report you're in. Accounts is typically, if you don't do it through the dashboard, where you would enter your main transactions. So I'll just go in and show you very quickly how you would do your sales and purchases. So sales, not very different from Sage, to be fair. So you would click on new invoice and then you get a screen that probably looks very similar to the screen you would see within Sage. So you'd enter the type of client, the date, the due date, which you can simplify by just putting +14. The invoice number is just standard, that's the next number along, but you can set up the first number. Branding is the type of invoice template I mentioned. You can have unlimited, so you can see here that the demo has different types of invoices, so we could pick a very orange invoice if we felt that was the right one for this particular customer. And then we just simply enter what it is we're selling. Now there is a preset list that you can set up for your own products to save time if you wanted to, and you can even have the prices entered. So it would come up as a suggestion, but you can change any of this that you want to. So if the VAT rate in this case isn't going to happen, and if you don't want that code, you can change all this around and then simply approve it if you have authority to approve it. If you haven't, then you would just enter it and then it would get sent to somebody who is able to approve invoices before it gets sent out. Up here, there is the ability to actually scan in and have attached any document or documents that you want that relate to that invoice. So for example, if you've got a couple of quotes and a few letters that relate to that invoice, maybe a set of specifications, all of those documents can be scanned in and linked here, so that whenever you visit the invoice, you can also visit any associated paperwork with it. So that means you've got everything at your fingertips. If you were chasing money, you could go into contacts and have access to their phone details, what they owe, the invoices that make up what they owe, and all the paperwork associated with that, so you don't need to go anywhere else in order to chase up and answer any queries. So that's the normal way that you would enter sales invoices. If that is too cumbersome, I say you can find alternative software. So if you've got sales online through a website shop, then you can just drag that straight in. But if you do paper invoices, you also have the facility for entering those into Excel line by line and then just simply importing them into Xero if you prefer to do it that way. And purchase invoices are exactly the same in reverse. There is the ability to enter repeating invoices, so you don't have to type all the details in many times. If you have a regular monthly invoice that goes out for, say, maintenance or something, then you set it up as a repeating monthly invoice and you don't need to create it each time. So that's the sort of main tabs other than the dashboard, but the dashboard is really where all the exciting stuff happens. And I'll show you that now, because this is where I think a lot of the time savings going to occur. So you've got a watch list, which is simply any key numbers you'd like to see immediately in your face, then you can set them up here. So for our clients, typically you'd have the sales, you might have the director's loan account, and maybe a few other costs just to see how they're going. So you can access these elsewhere, but they're immediately on your dashboard to view. The main bit is where your bank information is held, which is over here. So although I can't show you it on the demo version, there would normally be a bank feed button that you press and your bank transactions just appear within Xero. So once you've pressed that button, this is how it would look. Because obviously the demo version isn't linked to a live bank account, you can't do that, but the process will be the same. So what this says is that there are 28 bank transactions that have been imported from your bank that need looking at, and you need to do some work on it. So you click on that, and what you have here is really the work that you do on your bank in existing bookkeeping systems, but with a lot of the effort taken away. So the first thing is, over on the left side is basically a copy of your bank statement transactions, money spent and received, without you having to have entered any of that data. It just simply appears once you've done your bank feed. So this would be a mirror image of your bank statement, and because it's a mirror image, you will never have to do a bank reconciliation, which for most businesses is a huge amount of time. Entering the transactions and then trying to reconcile them is a lot of effort and a lot of work. Don't need to do that with Xero, it's already done. What you then do on the right hand side is you tell Xero what those things are. But cleverly, Xero does a lot of that work for you as well. And it does three things before you have to do any work. So firstly, it sees if there's any invoices in the system that look like they might be being paid or received by the items on the left. So in this first case, there is a bank receipt on the 7th of July appearing in the bank statement, and it recognizes that you've already entered an invoice in the system that has a similar name and an identical amount, and it's simply saying, is that money coming in paying that invoice? And if you're happy that it is, you just click OK, and it updates everything that needs to be updated in your bookkeeping system. So it updates your bank balance, it updates the fact that that customer no longer owes that invoice, and it matches up the payment to tell you when it was paid. Do the same with invoices to be paid. So there's an amount spent, and it's asking you if that amount spent is actually this rent invoice that was entered previously. And if you're happy that it is, you click OK. So that's the first thing it does. It tries to find invoices to match up without you having to do the effort. The second thing it does is it remembers what you did before. So if in previous months you've had something paid out to Ridgeway Banking Corporation, which is a bank fee, and you've entered details previously that said it's a bank fee and I want to put it to code 404 with no VAT, it recognizes that what you did last time, and it says, do you want to do the same? If you click OK, you don't have to enter anything. And the third thing it does automatically is it basically recognizes that there are rules that you can enter. So this typically would be things that you would use within direct debit standing orders, I'm guessing. So you can set up a rule that says, if this wording appears in my bank payment, then can you do this with it? Can you put this payment to stationery or whatever and do it every time? So I've set up a rule so I don't actually have to tell the computer system what to do with it. So if I'm happy that that rule, which you can go in and have a look at what that rule tells you to do, you can say, yes, that is that rule. It applies to that payment. So just do what I told you to do with it. So those three things happen effectively you still need to click OK to tell it that that's what you agree to do, but there's very little work to do with that. And that leaves you with effectively the rest of the bank payments that it doesn't do the work for you, so you now have to do a little bit of work. And that is fairly straightforward. So if we take, for example, that payment there, within the screen, you just need to say, this is the supplier, this is the code I want it put to, so I want that put to cleaning. Obviously, this isn't going to tie up with what that payment is. This is the description I want to put with it. Is there VAT? So if there isn't, I can take VAT off, but if I know there's VAT on it and I want it in my VAT return, I can enter that. I've got the ability at this stage of selecting which region, so if I want that reported on, I can say, well, that's obviously my East branch, and then I click OK. So although there's a little bit of work to do there, actually compared to entering all your bank transactions, typing them in, and then doing the reconciliation, this is a huge time saver. And that's all you would do. Basically, you go through, click all the OKs that have cropped up. So if I look at the next page, there's probably a few others. So I can see there's one that it's suggesting, another one there. So I check that those are right and just click on them if I'm happy. And I'm then left with typically about 2/3 of my transactions where I simply need to tell the system what it is. Now, if I'm trying to find invoices, so if it doesn't automatically recognize the invoices that it's paying, I can still find that manually. So if I think that that payment is paying off a few invoices, I can just go off and try and find those invoices, because that payment might be paying more than one invoice. So I type in Smart, because that's who I'm looking for as a supplier, and I can see that those are the two invoices that payment's paying. So if I click both of those, as soon as the amount matches, i.e. I've clicked £4,500 worth and that is the amount that left my bank account, as soon as that matches, it allows me to click OK. And again, as before, that payment pays off those two invoices and they disappear from that supplier's account. So you can find the invoices if it doesn't find them automatically, which it won't if somebody's paying, say, £100 off a bill, or if they're paying 6 invoices added together, the system may not be clever enough to pick up those. So you just go and find them yourself, and that's probably going to take you about 20 seconds maximum. And you just go through the whole of that right-hand side, enter the details once you've clicked all the OKs, and that's your bank reconciliation done. No further work to be done on your bank. So as soon as you get that number, it started off in this webinar at 28, and I've obviously dealt with 7. If you deal with all of those, then that's all your bank work done. No entering from bank statements, no bank reconciliation to be done, and you can do that with as many bank accounts as you want. You can do it with credit card accounts, you can do it with factoring accounts. They can all work on the similar process. And that, for me, is going to save a huge amount of time. And that's really it. I say it's not an overly complicated system in terms of how to use it. What it does behind the scenes is very, very clever. But I think there's a huge amount of time to be saved, primarily in the bank section, which is where a lot of the time is spent for people that are doing bookkeeping. Whether you're a qualified bookkeeper or not, still takes a lot of time. But also just in the modernness of it, the way you move around and drill down into different things, the flexibility of the reporting, and the fact that what I've just done could be being done at the same time as 6 other people are in doing different things, such as entering the sales invoices, etc. So that, in a nutshell, is Xero. Earlier I said that if you had any questions, you can start to ask them. So I think there's been a few questions, but they're primarily IT-based ones, so I will contact those people at a later time. I think they may have had some problems installing the GoToWebinar software. But if there are any questions, then please feel free to contact me. My email address is mark@marklawson.co.uk. Phone number is Plymouth 752210. Happy to answer any specific things, but I would strongly recommend that if you are on Sage or you're thinking about getting bookkeeping, that you have a look at Xero, log on to Xero.com, get your 30-day free trial, and just play around with it. Every single client that we've recommended it to, after the initial getting used to a new software, period, which is only about a week, they all rave about it. And we are now not recommending Sage to new clients, although we still support it. We would only recommend Xero or a manual system for new businesses, and we're also proactively recommending people who are on Sage move across to Xero at some point because of the amount of time savings it would have. It also allows us as accountants to get more involved with the business, where we can look at things and start to see how things are looking without having to ask for backups on a regular basis. So it allows us to be more interactive. And lastly, if you get a chance, just have a look at the help center. There are different things in help. So for example, there's a bit that says get help for this page. So if your problem is related to where you are, it drills down into help for that page. The help center is absolutely brilliant, huge. It's got videos, training sessions and so on. Or if you can't find or can't be bothered to actually look for help in that way, just simply contact Xero support. It's free, and I've used that many times for myself and clients, and they do come back, they do get questions answered, and if they can't, if it's very complicated, they will actually ring, and if necessary they'll take over the computer and get it working for you. So that's Xero. Hope you found that useful. So if you have any questions or you want to move forward with Xero, then please get in touch with me, and I will be contacting you shortly just to say thank you for attending and sending you a bit more information about Xero and what it does. But for today, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you either at the live seminars next time or on the next webinar, all of which will be sent to you as and when they crop up. So thank you for that, and speak to you soon.